back, relax, and maybe get yourself a snack. Me and you gonna have a little chat about books. Hey guys, so I am here today to talk to you guys about 5 more SPFBO titles. If you don't know what SPFBO is, it stands for the Self-Published Fantasy Blog-Off, and it's an event that goes on annually where self-published authors can submit their works for review by various bloggers and bloggers, and we are the judges, so I am one of the judges this year. I therefore have to read 30 books, choose my favourite to put forward as a finalist, and then read the other 9 finalists submitted by the other 9 blogs and bloggers. So I am in the middle of this. I'm actually over halfway through as of this set of reviews. These are the third 5 I have to talk about. So let's just get started. I'm going to go straight in and I'm going to go from my least favourite up to my favourite and tell you a bit about each of them. I'll also link loads more information about the Self-Published Fantasy Blog-Off below if you're interested in finding out more about it, because it's really, really cool. So the first book I want to talk about is one that I actually DNF'd at about 15-16%, The Dead Sagas Volume 1 Part 1, A Ritual of Bone, which is quite a title. And I unfortunately just really didn't get along with this because it turned out it was a lot more horror based than I expected. Obviously the cover is quite dark and grim, so I kind of expected a grim dark book, and I kind of thought this would be a bit more horrible than some of the others in the batch that I was reading, but I didn't really anticipate quite how horrific some of the events in this book were going to be, and I consider myself to have quite a strong stomach. I don't like horror reading because I don't particularly enjoy all those sorts of books where you're kind of getting all the graphic, gory details. It's not really my personal cup of tea. I don't tend to watch horror films, I don't tend to read horror books, but I have read horror in the past and been okay with it. But this one went a bit too far for me, so unfortunately I did DNF this and I only got to 15%. But I will tell you what happened before I got there and give you a little bit of a synopsis in case you are interested in horror and it might be for you. So in this story we follow a young apprentice at the very start of the book, and he is out with his masters hoping to try and uncover some secrets. They've kind of been living off the land a little bit and trying to uncover some ancient secrets to do with rituals and bones, hence the title of the book. So his plotline starts off when he is running away because he gets scared of something that looms out of the dark. It seems like some sort of presence is there, or something a little bit unusual is kind of there in the background, and he doesn't like it, so he ends up running away. And unfortunately he trips over, he falls, and he injures himself. And that's kind of where we pick up the story from his point of view. So we get a bit of insight into who he is, and also what the apprentice and what the master relationship is like, and kind of what they're working towards. So that began quite tame, and I thought I would enjoy it. We then switched to another storyline. There's actually a few, and they are the hunter and the captain. They're kind of the 2 other storylines I got to before I DNF'd the book. And the hunter is a character who is supposedly hunting down what's happened to lots of villages where the people have just kind of gone missing. Other villages have reported this, and someone has hired him to go and hunt down, find out exactly what's happening to the villagers, and just basically make sure it doesn't keep happening, because it's obviously a problem. And so he is on the trail of some sort of beast or animal or creature. He's not really sure, but he knows he's tracking it and he's on the right track because he can see that the villagers were there and then they were just kind of abandoned suddenly. So he's following this trail. However, it turns out when he does catch up to this trail, he finds a lot more than he bargained on, and actually it's really, really gross and grim and horrible what has been going on. I don't want to go into too many details because it's not really my cup of tea, but suffice to say it was really grim and I did not like reading about it, so that was kind of the first red flag for me. Then I moved on to the captain viewpoint, and the captain viewpoint is, again, starts out quite fine. It's about a captain who's on a ship, he's sort of leading it, and then over time his crew starts to fall ill, and as time goes on they actually end up dying in really, really horrific ways. Again, this was something that was quite vividly described and not really something I enjoyed reading about. It made me feel quite sick, if I'm honest, and I just didn't like that. It wasn't a pleasant reading experience for me. So again, it's pretty horrible, and then we see more of the crew as they dock and what happens to them after that. So those were the 3 viewpoints I kind of got to before I felt like I just didn't want to read it anymore. I gave it a shot, I think, a fair shot, but it's not my cup of tea, and there's nothing I can do about that really. So if you like horror, maybe this one would be for you. If you don't, maybe avoid it because it's definitely gross at some points. I'd also add that the grammar for this one was not great. There were quite a few instances where the wrong word was used, and you could kind of infer what was meant to be said in the context, but it just wasn't quite right grammatically. So I think maybe another edit, maybe before it went to print, but that's just my personal preference. So that is what I thought of that one. As I say, I DNF'd, I did not finish it, and I can't really give you guys any more than that, so that's that one. The next one I want to talk about is called The Fallen, and this one started out pretty interesting. I definitely admit that I wasn't quite sure where it was going to go, and I thought the beginning was really, really strong. It follows a young woman who is a seer in a clan, and she is called Shivali. She is part of the clan, I'm going to say this wrong, Blaukaners, maybe? And she is part of this clan. They're kind of a travelling clan who move around quite frequently. They all exist as a family. They're really, really close-knit. No one ever leaves. They're all just really, really good friends and family. And they've all grown up together in this clan. They travel around kind of telling people's fortunes and putting on fun fairs when they need money, but mainly they just love living off the earth and living together, and that's what they kind of aspire to do. So Shivali is the seer for the clan. She is someone who's very highly regarded, but also known to be very stubborn by the members of the clan. She is quite happy to be in her role. She doesn't really dislike it, but she does dislike the fact that the magic and the spirits who commune with her are actually pretty violent and can cause her a lot of pain when they do strike. She has some sort of magical telepathy thing where she can kind of, when she touches someone, she can see inside their minds, and that really helps her with kind of playing a seer or a fortune teller when the spirits are not there. She is able to see inside people's heads and kind of give them a little bit of information about whatever it is they might be seeking to know, and she does that very well, and the story starts off with that as its premise. We're following her, we're sort of getting to know her a little bit, and then we see 3 young men who kind of come into the camp and start talking to her and trying to find out a bit about her, and it seems like there could be something sinister going on, and then the camp is attacked and everything goes into absolute uproar after that, and Shivali's story takes on a very different storyline from where I anticipated. So for this one, I think, again, the concept was really strong, and I liked it a lot as a concept. I think the telepathy was done well, and I think Shivali as a character was someone that I could connect with and was interested in. However, as the story went on, I think the plotline just diverged from where I thought and where I wanted it to go. I feel like the mystery of the actual clan was something I really, really connected with and wanted to know more about. And then as the book went on, obviously events transpired that the clan was not really around so much, and I wanted to see more of them. I thought their lifestyle and the way that they lived and kind of developed as a family was really, really interesting and fascinating, and I don't feel like the plot that went on after that was quite as interesting as that one would have been. So personally, I think the direction turned a little bit away from what I wanted, but it was still an interesting story throughout, and I do think if you are interested in a kind of light-hearted, easy fantasy, this would be that. It didn't feel like it was too heavy, although there are some tragic things that happen, but it didn't feel like it was a really heavy read. It felt quite light and easy to get through, quite fast-paced as well, so I definitely liked it for that reason. It was a solid book with only a few sort of grammatical issues, although one of these was the main character's name being spelt wrong, which is kind of a problem. But in general, it was definitely a fun read, and I gave this one a 3 out of 5 stars, which equates to a 6 out of 10 for SPFBO purposes. The next one I want to talk about is called Hound and Key, and this one is one that I was quite intrigued by because the cover kind of gives off this indication that it's going to be a bit witchy, a bit magical, a bit sexy, a bit sensual, and I wasn't really sure which direction it was going to go. I thought it would be an urban fantasy, which I would say this one is. We're following a young man called Eric who is working for a woman called Ariadne, and she is kind of essentially a massive girl boss, I suppose. She's someone who owns a lot of industry, she's someone very well known and very sort of established in the business world, but she also has quite a few underhanded dealings that he is involved in and doesn't really want to be. He's kind of trying to find out a bit more about her other side dealings. He knows some of the things she's asked him to do are a bit dodgy, but they had a past relationship and it's all a bit messy, so he's not really ever questioned it until one of the people he goes on a date with ends up dead, and he knows it's because of her involvement, so he tries tries his best to find out what's really going on behind the scenes, and that is when he meets Hound and Key and many other powers who are behind the scenes. So in this world we have 5 powers who are called Breath, Hound, Key, Map and Lantern, and the 5 of them are kind of regarded as these powerful beings who are very secret. Most people don't know they exist, and many of them are actually concentrated together under Ariadne's control. And Eric finds out about these and he kind of gets involved in their plotline, trying to understand who they are, where they come from, what their real story is, why Ariadne is kind of keeping them all together, and what the situation with them is. He's trying to uncover more about them and also help them free themselves from her tyranny, if that is what they want to do. I think as the book went on, I found it a little bit predictable, and Eric as a character is not someone I really anticipate liking. He's not the sort of character I think I would be friends with in real life if he came up to me, because he is involved in quite a few questionable things before he decides to actually question things. But he is a character who you could kind of understand his motivations, you could see why he did things. It just wasn't my personal taste in terms of I wouldn't be friends with him. But as a main character for a story, he was interesting enough. And then I think as the story went on, I found some of the other characters, particularly the powers, were a bit more interesting. I did have an issue with the relationship that was developed quite early on, or kind of wasn't developed, because there was no real indication that a relationship was going to form. It was just kind of 2 people seeing each other, thinking sexual thoughts about one another, and then jumping into bed with each other. And I found that a little bit jarring because I didn't really feel like that was a developed relationship. And I think throughout this whole book, that was kind of one of my quibbles, was the fact that all of the characters felt a little bit suddenly there rather than actually developed as a character and someone you could really connect with. So that was one thing I kind of would have liked to see more of, just like characterization and development as the plot went on. However, the magic of this world is pretty interesting, and we have the 5 powers who each have their own power. So for example, Key is able to unlock any lock, Map is able to navigate anywhere, we have Hound who can track people, and we have Breath who is able to manipulate breath, and then Lantern is kind of more of an enigma at first, so I won't tell you about their power yet because that's kind of what you find out in the story. We also have these 5 powers able to essentially reincarnate in other people's bodies. It has to be some kind of relation, but they can reincarnate. So they're kind of immortal, which is kind of cool. Again, overall this was a fun read, easy to get into, very quick and fast paced throughout, and I didn't find it a struggle at any time to get through the story. I wouldn't say it's the most memorable of the books I've read, but it definitely was a fun one, and I again gave this a 3 out of 5 stars, which equates to 6 out of 10 for SPFBO. The next one I read for SPFBO is this one, which is Soul Render by T.L. Branson. I actually have a physical edition of this because I read this, I reviewed it, and then the author said to me that he would be happy to send me the book, so I said please do. He also sent me the sequel, which I'm really excited about. I actually really enjoyed this. I wasn't sure if I was going to when I started it because it seemed quite simplistic and very stereotypical as a beginning of a story, especially a fantasy one. But as time went on, I actually found that I really enjoyed it, and the story really developed and fleshed out quite a lot more than some of the others, and the characterization again was a lot better than some of the other SPFBO books I've read so far. So this was one that I did definitely enjoy. The story follows 3 young boys, and they are doing their best at the start of the story to steal a soul stone from a very corrupt king who is ruling over their country. They kind of have a grievance against him because of some of the events in their family life that have happened because of him, and they really do want to just mess with him and steal the things that are precious to him. So that is what they're trying to do when the book opens. However, unfortunately, they, or at least some of them, get captured and they are quite quickly put to the question, and they are discovered and uncovered, and many of their secrets come out. However, the secret of the soul stone itself does not, and one of them is able to manipulate it in strange ways, and we follow not only this character but the other brother as they go through a storyline. So we mainly focus on Will and Robert. I definitely enjoyed the characters of Will and Robert. They're both kind of stereotypical teenagers in that they make some really rash decisions that you kind of roll your eyes at because that's just what they do, but they actually both really care about fighting back and kind of standing up for what they believe in as well, which is obviously a great cause and something that I definitely liked reading about. They each have a storyline that kind of leads them to rebel, and they have incentive to do so. they also really just want to take this corrupt king down. The story opens quite quickly with a fast pace right from the beginning because, as I say, we open with them trying to steal this stone and then they're captured, and as they're captured it's quickly apparent that one of them is in quite a lot of trouble. He has this magical power that he doesn't really know how to control. The king is questioning him. People are kind of trying to get him to tell what he knows, but he doesn't even really know what he knows. And it's all a bit of a rushed situation where he just doesn't know how to comprehend what's going on. The idea of the magic in this world, the soul stones, is nothing too kind of out there. It's stuff I've read before. It's basically an idea of magical artifacts that can give you certain powers. But I think it worked really well as a backdrop for a fast-paced story, and these artifacts or stones are kind of the key focus for a lot of the characters, either trying to get them or trying to figure out how to use them if they have got them, or trying to figure out who is stealing them if they are being stolen. And we also see goddesses and people like that kind of getting involved in the storyline as well. So there is a lot going on magically speaking, and I like that because I think the balance between the plot, the characters, and the magic was quite good. The world is nothing too crazy or original, but in general it was a fun read and quite fast paced throughout, which kept it going really nicely. I would even say that it has some similarities to Mistborn in that it has these magical artifacts and it has this corrupt king. There's definitely elements of that in this book, and I like that. It was a solid read for me, definitely a fun one, and one that I certainly would continue the series for, so that's always good. And I gave this one a 4 out of 5 stars, which equates to an 8 out of 10 for SPFBO, so certainly would recommend this one if you're interested. And the final one I want to talk about in this video is called The Banished Craft. This one is one that I really love the cover of, but had no idea if it would be my kind of thing, because it kind of looks almost like a children's book from the cover. It's not. It's definitely a kind of YA read, maybe even like adult, because I guess the characters aren't teenagers, they're actually adults, but they feel quite young. I say that, but one of them is like an ancient dragon, so anyway, they feel kind of young. This story actually was my favourite of this batch and is my favourite to date of SPFBO, or at least my batch of them. And I really liked a lot of the elements that are in this book. We have fantasy, dragons, we have lady characters who are just kicking ass and like owning everything, people fighting back against oppression, more dragons, wit and charm, and characters who've got a lot of charisma, and dragons. Basically there's dragons, and I love dragons if they're done well, and I think they are in this. And we also have a really, really great female character lead on the other flip side as well. So in general, it was ticking a lot of boxes right from the opening for me. And then as the story went on, I just fell in love with the characters. I really, really enjoyed this. It was really good fun. It is quite a slow starter, but I think once you get into the book, it's quite quick to hook you in once you've got past that initial opening scene. And I really, really enjoyed the atmosphere and the kind of tense furore that was brought to the front of the story, so that was really good. This world is a split world where humans live in one world, or one sort of dimension I suppose, and dragons live in another. They both know that they had a shared past at one point, but as the course of history's gone on, something has happened that has separated out the worlds, and we don't really know exactly what or why, but we know as a reader that there are two worlds. The characters in the story don't yet know that, but over the course of the book they do discover it. One thing that is quite clear from the start to all of the characters is that something has been changing in their world. Something has been basically going wrong, or feeling a bit wrong or a bit off, and they know this and they've noticed it, but they don't really have an exact cause to pin it down to yet. In the human world, women are treated as very much lesser than men. They are not allowed to enter the library, they're not allowed to do an awful lot except kind of talk about domestic stuff and do domestic stuff. They're really not treated very well, and we just have one main character in that world who is kind of defying the norms and the stereotypes. The human world is also split up into different regions, so we have marsh state, cave state, sea state and farm state, and they are all kind of governed together by one ruler who is elected every year by a sort of council. However, their voting system is quite flawed, and many of those flaws are explored and talked about in this story as well. So I just want to talk about some of the characters that we encounter. First off, let's start with the dragon characters. So we have Jwala and Atesh, and they are a dragon couple. Jwala is actually part of the kind of royal army or guard. She works there and has done for many years, and she's very loyal to them. But as time goes on, she finds herself kind of oppressed by the people who she works for. She finds that their beliefs and their alignment is quite different to hers, which leads her to have to start fighting back against them. And that's where her story really got interesting for me, because she kind of took on this amazing matriarchal role, and she became someone that I really sympathized with and related with, so I liked her a lot. We then have her sort of partner, husband, who is called Atesh. He's also a dragon, and he's actually a scientist who is working for the crown. He's someone who is quite highly regarded by many of the other scientists, but he has his own sort of personal experimentations going on as well, with some sort of drug or plant that no one really seems to know an awful lot about. And their story really begins when the Emperor of the Dragon World, who is female, orders the two of them, well mainly Atesh, orders Atesh to work on some sort of secret weapon for her, and things really start going downhill for them because they don't agree with this weapon and they don't agree with the Emperor, and not agreeing with the Emperor is a bad thing. Talking of the Emperor, we have the Emperor Z, and we have Donna, who is like her chief guard, I suppose. Z is the ruler of all dragonkind, and she's very magnificent and marvellous to look upon. She's quite terrifying to look upon, and everyone kind of really highly regards her. But even though she's scary, she's not quite as beloved as she may want to believe, and a lot of people dislike her. Meanwhile, Donna is an absolute brute. She is horrible, she's fierce, she just wants everyone to be in fear of her. She does not really pull any punches, she's quite rude and brusque, and she's just not a very nice character, someone I would definitely not want to cross if I were you. We then have Sarah and Jelt. Sarah is a young artist, and his friend Jelt is also an artist, and together they are trying to pull off a spectacular kind of installation piece. They want to be the most revered, amazing artists in the whole of dragonkind, and they think the way to do this is by manipulating something to do with the Emperor and pulling off the biggest stunt there's ever been. Jelt is very much kind of manipulating his friend in this scenario because Sarah really wants to be this wonderful, kind of world-renowned, very much remembered artist whose work is highly praised and acknowledged, and Jelt is using that for his own purposes, for reasons that are quite valid, admittedly, but he is manipulating his friend, so they were an interesting duo. I feel like there is a bit of naivety in the relationship and also quite a lot of kind of clever manoeuvring, and I liked that a lot. I thought it was an interesting dynamic. Moving on to the human world, we have Kor, who is kind of the main lead character of the humans. She is female. She is someone who originally grew up in cave state, but she was basically kind of illegal because her parents died when she was quite young, or she thinks they were murdered, and she was raised there by their next door neighbour, who kind of helped her grow up and taught her everything she knows and told her about her family, but never really told her the entire truth as far as Kor can see. She thinks there's more to it than what she's been told, and she's got a special mark on her which she really wants to find out more about. She's the most curious character. She's someone who wants to investigate and just uncover things, but in a world which is very much dominated by males, and somewhere that she can't really be herself and she can't really show her passions and who she is. She has to rely on men, some who are very annoying, to help her get access to the library, to help her do things, and she gets quite frustrated by this, as anyone would. So she's quite a strong character. She definitely has urges, and she's someone who is quite kind of respondent to those urges, I suppose. But in general, she is a character that I really liked, and although she makes some decisions which I think are ruled more by lust than love, she certainly is someone who I think I can relate to in terms of her frustrations and the way she was angry at the patriarchy, and just someone who was really quite cool. She did a lot of good things, and made you question a lot of things in the world and the setup of the world, which I thought was really good. We also follow Francie and Greg, who are the president and president's wife. Francie is a character who I really enjoyed. She's actually a female character who is in a position of power in this world where females so rarely have it, but she is still suppressed by her husband, and he is someone who doesn't really seem to treat her as an equal anymore. When they first began ruling, they definitely did, but as time's gone on and more catastrophes have come up, he's kind of taken things onto his own lap and not really included her in a lot of things, and she feels a bit useless. So Francie decides she's going to start doing her own thing, which, let's be honest, is pretty cool. She is a really kind of, I don't know, she's a secret character who plays different parts. She dresses up in the night and steals out and does things, and she's someone who kind of isn't afraid to make statements and change things, and she really is the person that I would rather have seen as the president rather than the president's wife, because she makes the decisions and she's kind of the guiding hand for him and really is an impressive character. So I like her a lot. And finally, we also follow Bonzo, who's a character, human man who is kind of wronged by the system, and he starts this uprising by preaching and telling everyone that they should stand up and not accept the president and the president's rules any longer, because things in the world are terrible and everyone needs to act and kind of change things to make things better. As I said before, the story, once you get into it, is really quite a strong one. I felt like it was quite unique, and the world, or the worlds I should say, are really, really interesting. There is one kind of common denominator between them, which is a plant, and this plant seems to be the crux of the story, or like a big part of it anyway. And I'm definitely intrigued about where the plot will go, because I think that things only get started by the end of this book. We feel like it's really a setup book, and it tells you a lot about the world and the characters and kind of what is happening and what the current sort of political state is, but it doesn't tell you where it's going yet, and I'm super intrigued about where it's going. We also have this kind of disembodied voice kind of speaking to us at the start of some of the chapters. They seem to know a lot more than we do, or any of the characters do, and I'm so intrigued about who that is. I found that once I understood who was who, because there are a lot of characters, I really connected with a lot of the characters, and I thought that I could understand all their motivations. Their characterization was great, and they just felt like really interesting people to follow, or dragons to follow, so I like that a lot. One of my few niggles with this is the fact that some of the characters do make irritating choices. I'm mostly referring to people like Core in this, where she makes a choice based on like lust over anything else instead of thinking, but that's just, I guess that's what humans do. We are a bit rash and so on, so it kind of makes sense. On the whole, I would definitely recommend this. I gave it a solid 4.25, which equates to 8.5 out of 10 for SPFBO, and it's definitely up there as my favourite of the ones I've read previously, so I would certainly say well worth checking this one out. I believe the author has actually sent me the sequel as well very recently, so I'm super excited to read that, because I think it's going to be good, or at least I hope so. But yeah, I really enjoyed this, and I definitely think if you are looking for something a bit fresh, a bit interesting, with dragons and great lead characters, some of whom are female, then this is definitely that kind of read. It flows very nicely once you get into it, and it's just a fun story. So that is everything I read for this batch of SPFBO. I will be reviewing some more fairly soon, because I've already read another one and I intend to read some more very soon. That is everything for this video. Thank you all so much for watching. Thanks to the authors for sending out your books, and I will see you all very soon in my next video. Bye guys!
Thank you for watching my video today. Go pick up a book, then come back and chat with me again.